There are days that announce themselves as ordinary and then refuse to remain so. They begin with the specific, unremarkable texture of a scheduled appointment, the alarm, the drive, the waiting room with its particular quality of suspended time, and then something happens in the middle of the ordinary that divides the day into before and after, not dramatically, not with the violence of sudden catastrophe, with the specific, quiet devastation of information delivered professionally, carefully, in a clinical space designed to contain exactly this kind of information. Robin Williams had that kind of day in the spring of 2009. The appointment had been routine, the kind of routine that accumulates across the years of a life, the periodic maintenance of a body that has been working hard for a long time, the ordinary administration of health that becomes more necessary and more attended to as the decades pass. He had not gone in expecting anything specific. He had gone in because the appointment was scheduled, because his physician had been asking him to come in for a follow-up, because the ordinary business of staying well required it. The results were not ordinary. He sat across from his physician in the examination room and listened to the specific, careful language that physicians use when they are delivering information that is not good and that they want to be received as accurately as possible, without being made more frightening than the facts themselves require. He listened. He asked questions. His physician answered them with the same careful precision. He listened to the answers. He drove home. He does not remember the drive with any specificity. What he remembers, what he told the people close to him, in the specific way that certain things get told to certain people, in the private architecture of a life, is what happened before the drive home. What happened in the corridor of the medical building, between the examination room and the exit? He was walking toward the exit. The corridor was the specific institutional corridor of a medical building, the particular quality of fluorescent light, the doors on either side, the ambient sound of a building in which people are attending to their health in various states of urgency and non-urgency. He stopped, not because of anything he saw immediately. He stopped the way people sometimes stop in corridors, because the forward momentum of the appointment had concluded, and the next thing had not yet organized itself, because the space between the examination room and the exit contained more than the distance suggested. Then he saw the boy. He was approximately 12 years old, sitting in one of the chairs that lined the corridor wall. The chairs were the specific plastic chairs of a medical building's waiting area, functional, arranged in a row, the kind of chairs that are designed for the practical purpose of waiting, rather than for any comfort beyond the basic. The boy was sitting in one of them with the specific quality of a child who has been in medical settings long enough to have learned how to inhabit them, not anxious, not performatively brave, simply present in the particular way of someone who has spent a significant portion of their life in corridors like this one. He had a bag beside him. The bag had the specific, practical appearance of a bag that contains medical supplies, the organized, functional bag of a child who travels regularly between home and hospital and has developed a system for the traveling. He was alone. Robin sat down beside him, not because he had planned to, not because he had made a decision. He sat down the way people sit down when the alternative, continuing to walk toward the exit, does not present itself as the available option. He sat in the plastic chair beside the boy and looked at the corridor ahead. The boy looked at him. He recognized him. Children who have spent significant time in medical settings have a particular relationship with the ordinary. They have seen enough of what is not ordinary that they have become, in some ways, sophisticated observers of what is in front of them. He recognized Robin Williams with the specific calm recognition of a child who is not performing the recognition. He said, "Are you sick too?" Robin looked at him. He said, "I found out some things today that I'm going to have to deal with." The boy nodded. He said, "I've been dealing with things for 2 years." Robin said, "What kind of things?" The boy said his name was James Kowalski. He was 12 years old. He had been diagnosed with leukemia 2 years earlier. He was in the middle of treatment, had been in the middle of treatment, in one form or another, for most of those 2 years. His mother was at the pharmacy on the ground floor. He was waiting for her here. He said all of this with the specific, matter-of-fact quality of a person for whom the information has been true long enough that the telling of it has lost most of its weight. Not because the weight was gone, the weight was present in everything about the way he sat in the chair, in the specific quality of his body, in the bag beside him, but because the telling of it had been separated, across 2 years, from the full weight of the being in it. Robin listened. Then James asked, "What did you find out?" Robin was quiet for a moment. He said, "That something in my brain is not working the way it should be, that there are going to be some difficult things ahead." James looked at him. He said, "Does it scare you?" Robin said, "Yes." James said, "Me too. At the beginning. Still sometimes." Robin said, "How do you manage it?" "The fear." James thought about this with the specific seriousness of a 12-year-old who has been asked a genuine question by an adult and is giving it the attention it deserves. He said, "I think about the next thing. Not the whole thing, just the next thing." Robin looked at him. He said, "That's good advice." James said, "My mom told me that. When I first got sick. She said, just think about the next thing. Don't think about all the things. Just the next one." Robin said, "Your mom sounds like a smart person." James said, "She is. She cries a lot, but she's smart." They sat in the corridor for approximately 20 minutes. James's mother returned from the pharmacy, a woman in her late 30s, carrying a bag, whose expression as she came down the corridor and saw her son sitting beside Robin Williams held the specific, layered quality of a person processing several things simultaneously. The recognition, the surprise, the specific parental assessment of whether her son was all right, and the conclusion of the assessment. She sat on the other side of James. The three of them sat in the corridor for a few more minutes. The conversation moved through the ordinary James's treatment schedule, the school he attended when he could attend it, the specific accommodations that his medical situation required. It moved through these things with the ease of a conversation that has found its natural level, not performing anything, simply present in the specific way of three people who have found themselves in the same corridor at the same time with the same specific kind of information to carry. When they stood to leave, James said, "I've been sick for 2 years and I'm still here. That probably doesn't mean anything about you, but it's true about me." Robin said, "It means something." James said, "I hope your next thing goes okay." Robin said, "I hope yours too." James and his mother walked toward the exit. Robin stood in the corridor for a moment. Then he walked to the exit too. He drove home. He told the story in the specific, private way that certain things get told to certain people about the corridor, and the 12-year-old boy named James Kowalski, who had been dealing with things for 2 years, and who had said, "I've been sick for 2 years and I'm still here." He told it not as a story about comfort received, exactly, but as a story about recognition, the specific recognition of being in the same corridor, in the same quality of uncertainty, with someone who had been in it longer and was still in it, and was still present in it, in the particular way that James was present. He kept the next years, the years of what he was managing in the way that James's mother had suggested, though he had come to the principle independently, as these principles are sometimes arrived at independently by people in similar circumstances, by thinking about the next thing rather than the whole thing. The whole thing was too large to hold all at once. The next thing was always manageable. He did not know, during those years, what was actually happening. The diagnosis he had received in 2009 was not the full picture. The full picture would not be available until after his death in 2014, when the autopsy revealed the specific and devastating nature of what had been progressing in his brain across those years. What he had been told in 2009 was a partial picture, the best available picture at the time, the picture that the medicine of 2009 could provide. He managed it with the tools available. He continued working. He made films and performed and appeared and gave the specific quality of himself that the work required. He had difficult periods and better periods. He was present in the life that was available to him, and he thought about James Kowalski. Not constantly, not obsessively, but sometimes, in the specific quiet of the difficult periods, he thought about the 12-year-old in the corridor who had been dealing with things for 2 years and who had said, "Just think about the next thing. Don't think about all the things. Just the next one." He did not know what happened to James. He did not have a way to find out. The encounter had been what it was: two people in a medical corridor on a specific day, sitting together in the same kind of uncertainty, saying the things that were available to be said. James Kowalski is 27 years old. He completed his treatment. He has been in remission for 14 years. He lives in Chicago. He works as a nurse in a pediatric oncology ward. He chose the work deliberately, understanding that the people who had cared for him across 2 years of treatment had given him something that he wanted to give in return, and that the work of giving it required being in exactly the kind of corridors he had grown up in. He does not know for certain what happened to the man he sat beside in the corridor in 2009. He knows what everyone knows. He knows the specific facts that were made public in 2014 and that reorganized for many people their understanding of the years that had preceded them. He thinks about the conversation sometimes. He thinks about what it meant that the man sat down beside him without explanation, without agenda, without the performance of celebrity generosity. He sat down the way you sit down when you need to sit down, when the corridor has more in it than the distance suggests. He asked genuine questions and received genuine answers and said genuine things in return. He did not pretend that the things James told him were not difficult. He did not perform optimism. He was simply in the corridor with the same quality of uncertainty and the same need to sit for a moment before continuing. James has told the story to patients on the pediatric oncology ward who are sitting in corridors like that one. Not the specific details, he protects the specifics, understands that the specifics belong to the conversation rather than to the retelling of it. But the principle, that sometimes the most important thing is who sits down beside you when you're waiting in a medical corridor, and that the person who sits down might be carrying something of their own, and that the carrying of it together, even briefly, even between strangers, is something. He tells them, just think about the next thing. He learned it from his mother. He learned it again, in the corridor, from a man who had just come from an examination room with his own set of difficult things to carry. The next thing, always just the next thing, that is enough. That is the corridor. That is everything. There is a particular kind of corridor in medical buildings. Not the emergency corridors. Those have their own specific quality of urgency, their own particular atmosphere of bodies in motion and decisions being made. The corridors in question here are the other kind, the waiting corridors, the ones that run between examination rooms and pharmacies and exits, the ones where people who are not in crisis but who are attending to things that require attention sit in plastic chairs and look at the walls or the floor or the middle distance and carry whatever they are carrying while waiting for whatever they are waiting for. Robin Williams sat in one of those corridors on a day in the spring of 2009. He sat beside a 12-year-old named James Kowalski who had been sitting in corridors like that one for 2 years. The specific quality of what happened in the corridor is not a dramatic story. No dramatic thing happened. 2 people sat in plastic chairs. They talked for approximately 20 minutes. James's mother returned from the pharmacy. They sat for a few more minutes. They stood up and said goodbye and walked in the same direction toward the exit. This is not a story about a dramatic thing. It is a story about a corridor and what corridors contain. What corridors contain, in medical buildings, is the specific quality of uncertainty. Not the acute uncertainty of an emergency, the uncertainty that produces action, that has an immediate practical demand. The chronic uncertainty of conditions that are being managed, that have timelines and treatment schedules and follow-up appointments that exist in the daily life rather than interrupting it from outside. The uncertainty that a person carries in a bag beside their chair, James had been carrying that uncertainty for 2 years when he sat in the corridor in 2009. He had been 12 for a month. He had been in treatment for most of his 11th and 12th years. He had developed, across those years, the specific relationship with uncertainty that people who live with chronic medical conditions develop. Not the absence of fear, but the coexistence with fear. The specific skill of continuing to move through the days while carrying the thing that could not be put down. His mother had given him the practical instrument for this. Think about the next thing, not the whole thing, the next thing. It was not, as she had given it to him, a piece of philosophy. It was a piece of practical advice from a woman who had been watching her son carry an enormous weight for 2 years and who had found, through the specific trial and error of accompanying someone through a difficult illness, the most useful available tool for the accompanying. Don't think about all the things, just the next one. James had used it. Not perfectly, not without the periods of thinking about all the things those periods came, in the night, mostly. In the specific hours when the next thing was sleep, and sleep would not come, and the whole thing presented itself with the particular vividness of thoughts that arrive at 3 in the morning. But in the practical daytime navigation of what his life required, the principle had been useful. It had been the tool that made the 2 years of treatment navigable rather than impossible. He told it to Robin Williams in the corridor without knowing the full weight of what he was giving. He was 12. He was telling an adult something his mother had told him, because the adult had asked a genuine question about how to manage fear, and the principle was the most honest answer he had. He was not aware of giving a gift. He was answering a question. Robin received it as what it was, the most honest, available answer to a genuine question, given by someone who had been in the territory being asked about for longer and who had found a tool that worked. He kept it. Not in a grand or ceremonious way, not as a lesson he performed or articulated or shared in interviews, in the quiet, practical way that useful things are kept, by using them when they are needed. And they were needed, in the years that followed, with increasing frequency and increasing urgency. The years from 2009 to 2014 are years that the people who loved Robin Williams have described in various ways with the specific difficulty of describing a period that they were in without knowing what it would become, a period whose full shape was only visible in retrospect. They have described the difficulties, the changes, the fears, the specific quality of a person navigating something that was not yet fully understood, that would not be fully understood until after. He navigated with the tools available. The next thing, always the next thing, a film, a performance, a day, a conversation, the specific, practical forward motion of a life that is continuing to be lived in the presence of something that cannot be fully named. He thought about the corridor sometimes. He thought about the 12-year-old who had been dealing with things for 2 years and who had said, "I've been sick for 2 years, and I'm still here. That probably doesn't mean anything about you, but it's true about me." "It means something," Robin had said. He had meant it. Not as a comfort received the specific circumstance of a 12-year-old with leukemia being present and ongoing was not directly transferable to whatever Robin was managing, but as a recognition that presence in the face of ongoing difficulty is its own thing. That the still here-ness of someone who has been carrying something for 2 years is a specific and genuine fact, and that the fact carries information. Still here. He was still here, too. For several more years after the corridor, he made the work he made. He was present in the life he was present in. He managed the next things as they came. James Kowalski manages next things every day on the pediatric oncology ward where he works. He manages the next thing for 12-year-olds and 9-year-olds and 15-year-olds who are sitting in corridors, carrying bags with medical supplies, and waiting for their mothers to come back from the doctively. Pharmacy. He sits with them. He asks genuine questions. He receives genuine answers. Sometimes he tells them, "Just think about the next thing." Don't think about all the things, just the next one. He learned it from his mother. He learned that it works from 2 years of using it. He learned, in the corridor, in 2009, that it can be given that the specific, practical tool of navigating uncertainty by focusing on the next available thing can be passed from one person to another in a medical corridor in 20 minutes, across the specific, shared territory of not knowing what comes next. He does not know if it helped. He thinks it might have. He thinks about the conversation and about the man who sat down beside him without explanation and asked genuine questions and received genuine answers and said, "It means something." He thinks about the drive home that the man must have taken after. He thinks about the years that followed. He thinks about what those years required. He thinks about just the next thing. He hopes it was useful. He thinks it might have been. That is the corridor. That is what corridors contain. Two people in plastic chairs in a medical building in the spring of 2009, carrying their respective uncertainties, sitting together in the specific quality of a corridor where people wait. One of them said, "I've been sick for 2 years and I'm still here." The other said, "It means something." Both of them meant it exactly. That is the whole of it.